This is your moment. This is your time. Embrace every milestone. No looking behind. What's your vantage point?
Over 50 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the 11 o'clock hour on Sunday morning is the most segregated hour of the week. Welcome to Vantage Point. Today we are going to be talking about segregation in the church. This response, this statement made by Dr. King was actually a response to a letter that the white clergy put in the newspaper in Birmingham. And they told Dr. King, for the most part, mind your business. Go back to where you came from and let us deal with things the way we think we should deal with them. And Dr. King says he never really responded to the many letters that he received. But this one got him worked up. And he responded to them. And he was saying how the reason he was there is because of the injustice done to African Americans in Birmingham. And the mere fact that white clergy, instead of getting on the side of justice, they looked at him as the villain. What are your thoughts on segregation in the church?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for bringing that up, because I don't think a lot of people remember that Martin Luther King was a reverend. I think they think of him as an activist, and he's like the poster child for African American the civil rights movement. But he was a reverend, and all of his education, all of his learning, he was so moved by God and the love of God for people. He went on to be concerned about India and other places as well. So when he was talking about justice, he was getting that straight from the Bible. And the Bible says that they will know us by our love. So if they're going to know us by our love, how is it that they're going to know us when we have Asian churches here, black churches here, white churches there, Hispanic churches there? What does that say about the body of Christ and this love that we're supposed to be having?
And do you still think that, so that was well over 50 years, do you think that that's still going on today? Do you think that the quote, the statement that he made is still relevant today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do, churches are segregated. And not only by race and culture, but even by class and affluence. That's a whole nother level. But to your point about, how do we distinguish a Christian? Through love. I do think, how did these churches evolve? It was safe. It was safe to go to a place where you share the same cultural values and not even beliefs. You were just safe, you couldn't mix. And it just kind of stuck, and it turned into a us and them. But I know for me, I grew up in a very diverse church, very, very diverse. There was a season when we went to a very Spanish church, and let me tell you, that's like Pentecostal on steroids. That's like next level. But then, my family ended up going to a more diverse church, and the church that I attend now, it's somewhat diverse, but I think any church, if you're going to represent Christ, if you're going to present love, your church should look like heaven. But if it doesn't make you bad. But there should be some diversity, whether it's in race or in class or in profession. I mean, I don't know, but diversity should be there somewhere.
You know what I think? I think that the composition of the church body should look like the area that it's in. Because sometimes, if you are in a completely black area, then I'm not going to hold you responsible. How come a quarter of your congregation isn't Chinese, isn't Asian, isn't Japanese? You know what I mean? So I really think they should come from the demographics of where you are. But what that means, so if you're in a place that's 90% black and 10% white, you should have white people in your church. Because the major point is that they feel comfortable in coming. Are you such a church, and is what you're saying so godly and filled with God's love that anyone would be comfortable coming, even that 10%? Or if you flip it, if it's 75% Hispanic and 25% Asian, would the Asian people feel comfortable coming to your environment? I used to be a church secretary, and it was it's in California, and it was a Chinese English church. They had 3 services, one in Mandarin, one in Cantonese, and one in English. And they did everything that they could to make the English people feel welcome, because some of the English-speaking people could speak Cantonese. So we did everything we could, because the idea was you should be welcomed in whatever service you come. I think that's really the point.
But going back to that, though, I truly believe one of the reasons why we are segregated is because we as a people, we have a tendency to attend a church where you feel like you can relate to your pastor. So if you have an African American pastor, you feel more, okay, I can connect with him or her. If you have if you're white and you have a Caucasian pastor, bishop, what have you, you feel like you can connect. And people like to attend churches where they're the majority. Let's be honest.
Yeah, and I hear that,
know.
but I think that's a flesh connection as
I
opposed
agree.
to a spirit connection. Because I should be attracted to your spirit. Spirit doesn't have a color.
Right.
That is very true, but let's be honest, that's not the case here. Because how many years ago did Dr. Martin Luther King write that?
It's almost 51.
Exactly. But that is still the case today. I would say that is still the case today. But why is that? It's not because we're not teaching the word. Our church is somewhat diverse, but we are the majority.
But it's what Alexis said. It really has to do with zoning, for lack of a better term. Where you are zoned is quite naturally where the community that the church sits in is usually the population that's drawn. My issue partially is that we are segregated within ourselves. You have 6 churches in a 2-block circumference. Is that necessary? You know, and are we really appealing to the population that we should be appealing to? When I say that, I mean, why are we appealing to, should we be appealing to a color or to drawing spirits, drawing people in? I will draw all men to me. So should the church market to a certain demographic? So more of a question, do you think?
So you say market and you use business terms, okay? And there's business terms, and to some extent you have to govern a church. A good church has good governance, and I love church with order. I do know I was exposed in a season of my life of a church not too far from other churches where they literally convened their leadership team to combat another church down the road, to strategize, because that other church down the road was now being televised. Now, around the corner, down the block, you've got all these lost people who need Jesus. They need love. But you're meeting about responding to the growth or to the televised church. That's awful. We lost. Like, there's a lot of church, I mean, I don't want to say it that, I'll say it. There's some people who are just lost. People get lost. But you got to be around the right people to keep you grounded. You're losing it. You're losing, the Great Commission. And you're now subscribing to, like, business acumen to run a church. I'm not dismissing governance in a church. That's important.
It is.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because God is a God of order.
Right.
However, there are too many churches that function like, let's get our numbers up, as opposed to let's reach hurting people.
One of the things that I found, I want to address that because I'm a marketer. And I've been marketing in parachurch organizations and churches and organizations for over 30 years. And one of the things I find is really necessary is a balance. Because I always say this, the greatest marketing tool there is people going out and telling about Jesus.
Right.
It's
Right.
testimony. I mean, that's what Jesus used. He said, my whole gospel is going to be spread by someone saying, I like this. If your congregation is being well fed, and if your minister is promoting the idea of sharing Christ, then that's going to happen. That's going to be your greatest marketing tool. I would not basically think that you don't need marketing in a church, or you don't need that kind of business acumen, being on time, professionalism, et cetera, because I think a lot of churches don't have that, and they fail because of that. But at the same time, I really think the heart of the matter is, what is your particular mission? What is the vision of the church?
And I'm so
Now, there are some
glad you said
churches
that.
who are very evangelical.
Right.
They have everybody, as soon as you get baptized and you hit the road and you are out there on the streets and you're bringing people in.
Right.
There are some that are more discipleship based. And so they're going to be, after you come in, they're going to be training you, etc. Some have a focus on families, a focus on marriage, etc. So I really think, going back to your point about who is the pastor in charge, I think it has more to do with that vision for that church.
The heart of the church.
The heart of the church. But I don't agree that, well, I can't say that people don't do this, but I think that it would be wrong for people to judge the congregation based on the color of the pastor. First of all, there are pastors who do not look like their congregations.
Yeah.
And I'm always amazed that, you've got a congregation of all these African Americans and you're Caucasian and people follow them anyway. But the other thing is that to me, that speaks of an appropriation, because that whole thing about white Jesus.
Oh Lord.
Jesus, if you look at those pictures that came out, I don't know how long they came out, but they were out in the 50s and the 60s, and you've got this long, blonde Jesus with his blue eyes, when the Bible says, hey, we don't know how he looked.
Right.
And the small amount that it does talk about his looks does not lend to Caucasian with blue eyes,
Right.
especially if he's a Middle Eastern Jew. So that kind of appropriation, that kind of ownership, I own Jesus and so he looks like me.
Right.
I own Jesus so he looks like me.
You know what is so ironic and deep about that is white flight. So how a lot of, or a number of churches in the inner city that you see are now Catholic churches. So you see churches that move into Catholic buildings that were once neighborhoods of whites, but when white flight took place, they left, they took their churches with them. Our African American churches moved into these Catholic churches, and what do you see on the stained glass? White Jesus. You know what I mean? It ain't JJ from the Good Times Jesus that was up on the wall. He's not hanging up, and God forbid you were to put, I don't even know a black church that has a black Jesus hanging in it.
Right.
And my issue when you were talking about vision is the vision of the church. And my issue with the church is the church was the heartbeat of the civil rights movement. It's where it all started. It was, if it were not for the church that I grew up in, I would have been like my girl on Dr. Phil, trying to figure out if I was white or not.
Oh, bless
because
her heart.
the place where I grew up was so white and I was so confused. But I knew when I went to my church, they taught me about my culture. They told me that it was okay to be a black woman. And now it seems like, and I don't, the church, a bunch of punks. The black church can be a bunch of punks sometimes because we need to be in the forefront of this movement. There's still a movement that is taking place.
Exactly
and
right.
it's like when the Dr. Kings went away and now you want Jesse Jackson to shut up and sit down and be quiet, and Aretha Franklin was still on the forefront. And who are the young pastors that are in the forefront of the civil rights movement, giving these people, supporting Black Lives Matter? The reason that they're doing Black Lives Matter the way that they're doing is because they don't have the leadership of God. Where are these godly men and women that are supposed to undergird the movement?
We have compromised.
We have totally.
have
I don't even know
compromised.
if it's compromise. We punked out.
We punked out, but also it goes back to knowing your history. You could speak on this subject very passionately because not only have you studied your history, but that thing is embedded in you. You were taught that. But today, what I'm learning, like I shared with one of our shows, that we had our children sit and watch Roots, and I said, no, you need to understand where we came from and why you are where you are today, not because of mom and dad. We had our ancestors who fought, died, raped, you name it, for us to have an education, for us to have a voice today. And I agree with you. The church should say something. We don't, because we feel we don't want to be controversial. We don't want to be correct. We want to be we want to be safe.
We want to
And
be
that's
safe.
punked out.
Right. And you use the word punk, right? We're punks in a lot of things beyond this. I say we. Yeah, it's true.
Just the body of
It's
Christ.
true.
Wow.
The
I'm about
body
to
of
say
Christ.
the body of Christ. Yeah,
right.
We're punks in issues of even homosexuality, the LGBTQ community. There's no compromise there. But with the body of Christ at large, there is a lot of compromise. Or I also see, well, I like this part. This fits with my ideology or my culture or where I live in the part of the country, and we're gonna hold fast to this in terms of our faith and how we practice this thing called Christianity in this part of these United States of America, right? So we're making it's the compromise. We're making adjustments all the time to fit where we are. So we're, concerning civil rights, concerning just all these movements, if we can just point to the love of Christ, it's almost like the straight line that we have to line up all this crooked mess to.
Yeah.
We should be focusing on, reconciliation, redemption, and living it out.
Yeah.
I hear you with reconciliation, redemption, and saving souls. But I want to know that this church, when my child won't, but Trayvon Martin, okay? The church should have rose up and did some kind. Sorry.
Yeah.
The church.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yes.
Should have.
Yes.
If I can't imagine if Stokely Carmichael and all these other great. Can you imagine?
But you know what? I agree with you that the church should have rose up, but I think it should have been all churches that should have rose up.
Exactly.
It should have been the
And
black
that's-
church.
Woo!
It should have
But
been
you
the
know
white
why I
churches.
don't?
It should have been
Exactly.
all the churches. Because
Exactly.
what happens is you get these people tend to own certain labels. So an African American church is going to automatically be Democratic.
That's good.
And that's not necessarily true.
Right.
A white church is going to automatically be Republican. And that's not necessarily true. If you're Republican, that means you're anti-abortion. That means you don't want a lot of government limitations in business. You're pro-business. And so they kind of claim this moral high ground. That's not necessarily true. If you're African American, then you must be Democratic, then you must be for social issues, but you don't care about the economy. You're a liberal. You can spend anything and you're not ruly. So those labels are so untrue. And I think people get locked into those labels.
Yes.
And you know, African Americans who may or may not be Democratic still care about abortion. You can't have a lock on whatever you think God says in this Bible. At the same time, you're weighing these things out because God says to love people, and how you treat someone who's a homosexual, or how you treat someone who had an abortion is just as important as we don't think abortion is right. So I think that separation is much more than just our race. It's a separation around political lines. It's a separation around how we read and interpret the Bible.
You're right.
When hearing you just now, you know, and I, when you talked about Trayvon Martin, I heard the mom. I heard her mom empathize. I felt that, right? How do you get everybody, no matter your race, no matter what faith you are, where church you attend, how do you get them to feel that?
You need a
That's the
leader.
issue.
You need a leader.
Just takes one.
It only takes one. Dr. Martin Luther King, the reason why he was so powerful is because he accepted responsibility for leadership. He said, if it has to be somebody, even if it costs me my life, which he knew it would eventually cost him his
Absolutely.
life. And people sometimes want to feel safe. And you know, President Barack Obama, his hands were limited pretty much.
Absolutely.
I mean, his hands were, but who do we have? Who can we name as the leader of our movement? And I'm not trying to make it separate, but you know, I have certain issues on segregation. I just really think we lost a lot with segregation. I love my white brothers and sisters. I love them all. But I think we lost our community. I think we lost some of our support. And I'm not for separation. I'm just saying I think we lost some things.
Okay, let me just make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that you would prefer that we still had segregation so that the black community would stay together and the white community would stay together? I just want to
If
make
there
sure.
was a way in my mind, and if this isn't right, it's mine. So you can't come back with mine.
It's
So
your vantage point.
but if it was my vantage point, but sort of, kinda. If there was a way that we could all exist and accept each other for who we are, that's just really the way. And maybe because of the way that I grew up in a segregated environment, and I know that molded me into who I am because I had this African American community around me, and as soon as I stepped over across the tracks, like changed for me. So I really do. I think we lost some stuff.
You know what I think on both sides, on all sides, we're very emotional about it. When you come to any table to negotiate, you have to be willing to give something up. You have to be willing to be a little bit vulnerable. I think on both sides, we're so emotional that we can't be objective because we're hurting. People are hurting and they're not ready to be flexible and they demand apologies. And I've never heard a formal apology to this country of what was, have y'all?
Actually, yeah.
So share, like these are the things we should talk about, but we are extremely emotional, and when we're emotional, we're not going to get anywhere but have emotional conversations and no one's willing to bend. It's almost like you stiffen up.
Well, but I want to hear what Alexa, because I see you bitten
Yeah,
that right now. What I want to say, so come on in with it.
I know Sergio want to jump in there too, but
It's okay.
what I wanted to say to your point about segregation. I think that segregation doesn't work because I think that as soon as you separate, it's not going to be equal. But what I think you might be talking about is when African Americans and whites were separated, the problem in the African American community is that it began to be separated.
Yes.
And that's classism.
Within itself.
Yes.
That's
I'm with you
classism.
on, there you go.
Because
I'm
when you
with
talk
That's
about,
good.
what's the thing in Oklahoma,
You lost me in Oklahoma, child. What happened?
I'm trying to remember the name of the group, but they were succeeding like crazy. It was all the blacks together. They were in it together. They had businesses. They had pilots. They had everything together. But the key was that they all stayed together. What happens in the black community is that it gets separated. So you have your talented 10th that are off going to college and doing well, and as soon as they can move out, they move out, and they move into the suburbs, and now they're by themselves. Now they're the little chocolate chips that are running around the white neighborhood. They have their own issues, and it's hard for them. I understand that. But then you have, what do you have here? You've got the lower socioeconomic part of the black community going, where are you? Where are you? And so what kind of leadership can we have when we're separated like this? And I think that's been a really key point.
I agree.
When I think of Martin Luther King, the fact that he was a man of God, but he took godly principles into the civil rights movement. And that is why, in my opinion, that it was so impactful. He spoke on love. He was against violence. That was all Jesus' teaching. Today, what I see is we don't want to touch that. We don't want to get our hands dirty. We don't want to, we know this is wrong, and to me, by us not saying or speaking to it, we're condoning it. That's my position in that situation. I believe as a church, we're afraid to speak to it because now it's like, oh, we may get negative press. So what? The beauty with Martin Luther King and the Angela Davis and the Black Panthers, they were not afraid to stand up for what they believed for.
And I don't agree with everything that they did.
I did not either, but they stood for something.
With everything
but
that
they stood
did.
for something.
Yeah, exactly.
See, we do serve a God of love, but we also serve a God of war. He's a God of order. When you mess with God's stuff, his principles, you went against his word, there were consequences. Yes, he is a God of love. That is the whole premise of the gospel. However, he's like, yeah, but you know what? Step to me if you want to. You want war? Let's go. But as a church, we was like, okay, we're going to stay right here, and we're not going to touch the Black Lives movement. Black Lives Matter. We're not going to touch the fact that our young African American males are being crucified, so to speak, in today's terms. Shot at. Right. We're going to cover this thing up. We're not going to say behind the pulpit, let's vote. We're not going to do that because you know what?
But wait a minute.
Because we're afraid.
But we will say something about a God-chosen president. Okay? We will say something about that.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Who's God's choice. But we don't want to talk about how we got to this conversation in the first place. We're so reactive. Like, we could have been proactive. And I'm not, I'm not bashing anybody in office, but I do know that hate crime rose 5% when that president was elected, when our current president was elected into office.
But he was God's choice.
And it continues to grow.
But he's God's choice.
So if you go by, all I'm asking for is consistency. If you go by that idea that Christians are going to pray about this election and whoever gets into the office is going to be God's choice, then when Barack Obama came into the office and Christians were still praying, that was God's choice. If you go by that logic, then all of the presidents who have been in office were God's choice. So you can't go around and say, oh, Barack Obama, he was horrible, we need something else, and now we have Donald Trump. You can't go back and forth and say one was God's choice without saying
But the people put all our presidents in office.
Oh, no, I don't agree with that.
No, I know.
Let me make that clear. I do not agree with that. We have to put that down. All I'm saying is trying to warn you too. You've got to be consistent.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. When you are in a position of leadership and you have great generals of the faith that stands before their congregations say, President Trump is God's choice. With all due respect, I have an issue when I see the foolery that goes on and the foolery that is being done to our people, and we sit back as a body and say nothing. That bothers me as a Christian woman. Because then we say God is love, but we're just great generals are saying, but this is God's choice. We look like complete morons. To the world, but you wonder why the church is weak. Sit down with that. Because the truth of the matter is we're not standing for, we're not actually applying what God says. Let's be real. And what we're afraid, and like in your words, we're punks. Because we want to be politically correct. We want to make friends. We want to make sure our viewers goes up. What do you stand for? Come on now. Come on.
Exactly. And it's not that people always say all lives matter. Duh.
duh, that's
We
a
know
given.
all lives matter.
That's a
All
given.
lives aren't in the line of fire.
Thank you very much. I don't have to first teach my child. Everybody doesn't have to first teach their child that they're a black man before they're a Christian either. You don't have to have the same conversations with your son that I have with mine. And I think, there are some single moms out there that could really use the support of an African American church helping to raise their son to understand who you are as a black man.
right.
Yes, it is very important that you know who you are as a Christian, but it is also important that you understand you are a black man who's a Christian. And you have to understand, we have to find out what our role as the church is now in regards to raising these young people up. When I was growing up, we had an international dinner. Every one of us was given a different ethnicity. You might have been French, you might have been Mexico, whatever it was. You had to study that culture and you had to bring in a dish. And we would sell tickets and people come, we would dress in our garbs and everyone would rotate and we learned about all cultures. I'm just saying, for me, my vantage point, I can only speak for Lori. If it had not been for the African American church teaching me my history, and a mother who had the wisdom to understand she needed help helping me,
Amen.
I don't know who I'd be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, this has been good.
I'm sleepy.
That's where you out,
That
friend.
me out. That was good.
That was good. I love it, and obviously we can go
much.
on
Yeah,
and on.
it's a lot.
Maybe we'll revisit this topic.
Yeah, we
because
should.
it's a lot.
Yeah.
But you know what? We always appreciate you guys listening in. You can tell we are fired up about this. We want to know what your vantage point is. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure that you like us on Facebook because we want to hear what you're saying. We all shared our vantage point.
What's yours?
What's your vantage point?